like to recognize Chairman Roger Williams for the prayer and the pledge.
Please stand. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please bow your head. Heavenly Father, God of all people, thank you for allowing us to be here today to share wonderful ideas for the future of this great country and the people that care about it so much. We also care about you, and that's why we strive every day to walk in your light and not in your shadow, our shadow. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Morning, I now call the Subcommittee on Rural Development, Energy, and Supply Chains to order. Without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. I now recognize myself for my opening statement. So welcome to today's hearing, Empowering Rural America Through Investment and Innovation. I want to say thanks to our witnesses for showing up today, traveling here at their own expense to spend some time with us and your expertise. So as the demand for AI accelerates, America's digital infrastructure is rapidly expanding into rural communities. This infrastructure consists of data centers being built far beyond traditional tech hubs, with many investments being made in rural areas, including in my district in Ellis County. Our rural communities and small businesses are at the center of America's AI-driven growth. Texas is leading the charge in data center development because of our pro-growth, pro-energy, and low regulatory environment that has minimized the hindrance of red tape. We've placed a strong focus on developing the workforce for high-paying, new-collar jobs, and data companies have recognized those benefits. The economic ripple effect from data centers can reinvigorate rural communities like mine by creating high-paying trade careers and supporting long-term economic activity in rural small businesses. For every direct job created at a data center, up to 7 jobs are supported in the surrounding community. Small businesses are supplying, maintaining, and supporting these facilities. From construction to infrastructure upgrades, data centers open doors for Main Street entrepreneurs and trade workers to be a part of the next generation of technical advances. Meeting the workforce needs of data centers across the country will take a whole-of-community approach to attract and train the skilled workers needed to succeed. Many of our military veterans who return to civilian life already possess the skills required for this industry. As a vet myself, I was proud to co-lead the bill that made the Boots to Business training program permanent alongside Chairman Williams and Representatives McGarvey and Schneider. Through this effort, our returning service members can be trained to fully utilize their military skills in entrepreneurship and opportunities, including those offered by the data center industry. This bill was passed in the FY25 NDAA and will continue to be a vital tool in meeting our workforce needs. Building out this workforce is a crucial step in securing America's energy dominance and supporting our national security. At the same time, industry leaders, local partners, and educational institutions are already stepping up with investments in advanced energy solutions that not only strengthen local infrastructure, but keep us competitive with the AI race with China. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses about how data centers can support local communities, strengthen the small business ecosystem, and help build a new middle class in rural areas across the country. And with that, I now recognize the ranking member, Representative Morrison, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Emerging technologies like AI and blockchains are redefining how people around the world live and work. These technologies are run on computers, but most computers don't have the processing power or compute needed to run them quickly enough for mainstream use. For advanced AI models to be developed or operated at a suitable speed, they must be hosted by a massive group of computers that collectively pool their compute, found only in data centers. The growth of AI, both in use and in development, has spurred an explosion in data center construction, which has caused a huge rise in demand for the electricity they need to function, as well as for water used by some data centers' liquid cooling systems. New data centers can bring benefits like tax revenue and investment to rural areas that sorely need them. But as we point out in most hearings, it's important to think about the whole picture, the benefits, the costs, who receives those benefits, and who bears those costs. The recent data center boom presents numerous challenges. First, data centers are causing residential customers' electric bills to rise by increasing electricity demand and straining the electric grid. Second, data centers draw on supplies of clean, drinkable, fresh water, stressing local water systems, sometimes in areas with already limited water availability and infrastructure. Third, computer part makers responding to AI developers' vast capital are shifting production from consumer parts to AI products, making computers and smartphones more expensive. And last but not least, new data centers are directly and indirectly increasing pollution and carbon emissions, posing significant environmental health risks. With all that said, these outcomes aren't foregone conclusions. It's possible to build more data centers in a way that doesn't hamper innovation, but also benefits the communities that surround them. We should be thoughtful and purposeful about the way we are building data centers. During the previous administration, Democratic congressional majorities enacted landmark laws to lower costs for consumers and small businesses. The Inflation Reduction Act created tax incentives to make energy cheaper and cleaner. The bipartisan infrastructure law invested hundreds of billions of dollars in our clean water and broadband internet. And the CHIPS Act funds and incentivizes domestic computer manufacturing, stabilizing and lowering computer prices. H.R. 1 slashed those IRA tax credits, and the Trump administration is doing everything in its power to halt the permitting of clean energy products, the cheapest and fastest forms of energy to build. He's also diverted billions in broadband funding to Elon Musk's company Starlink for unreliable satellite connections in rural areas. And he proposed cutting rural water and wastewater grants by $154 million this year and repealing the CHIPS Act. Altogether, President Trump is enabling data centers to make America's affordability crisis far worse. Still, we can salvage this situation. We can follow through on the far-sighted investments made by the previous administration and put in place common-sense guardrails that shield American consumers and small businesses from the excesses of the data center boom. I hope to have a clear-eyed and productive discussion about how communities, especially rural ones, can maximize the benefits and minimize the costs of the data center projects popping up across the nation. Affordability for Americans depends on it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to insert into the record the written statement of the Loudoun County, Virginia Board of Supervisors Vice Chair Mike Turner, and I thank the witnesses for being here, and I yield back.
Without objection. Without objection. And I will now introduce our witnesses. Is she here? I'm going to pay for this later at the baseball field. Thank you. I now recognize the Chairman of the Full Committee, Chairman Williams, for an opening statement.
That's a good recovery, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Elzey, for holding this very timely hearing, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today and joining us with this discussion on the impact of the data center industry on rural communities and small businesses. The data center industry is growing rapidly, and Texas is right in the center of the action. We are witnessing the economic and industrial revival with these businesses driving high demand for trade-skilled workers, and technical and trades jobs will be the backbone of the renewed American middle class. As Chairman Elzey has explained, veterans come ready with many high-demand skills that the data center industry needs. By making the SBA's Boots to Business program permanent last Congress, Chairman Elzey, myself, and other colleagues on both sides of the aisle are arming our veterans with the entrepreneurial skills and knowledge necessary to step into critical roles in leadership, not only in the data center industry, but across any industry. One of my highest priorities is to encourage more young people to pursue career and technical education, also known as CTE. And in pursuit of that goal, I've introduced two bipartisan bills in Congress, H.R. 1641, the Student Debt Alternative and CTE Awareness Act, and H.R. 1642, the Connecting Small Businesses with Career and Technical Education Graduates Act of 2025. These bills promote CTE programs and help graduates of these programs to find jobs with small businesses. Now, career and technical education is critical to meeting the growing demand for trade skills professionals and building the future of America workforce. Ambitious and entrepreneurial electricians, HVAC technicians, and plumbers are finding an industry overflowing with the opportunity in rural America. Data centers cannot operate without small businesses to build and maintain them. And of course, every opportunity comes with certain challenges. We look forward to discussing them with our witnesses today as we continue exploring the impact of data centers across our communities. I want to thank again our witnesses, again for joining us today and for your investment in the rural communities of Texas. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please, no wind sprints come March. And I'd like to add, before we delve into our witnesses, that as we talk about our veterans, thanks for the kind words, Mr. Chairman, that our veterans can be, have the discipline to be trained to do anything, and they have the drive to do everything. So they're going to be an essential part of this. Our first witness today is Mr. Chris Crosby, the Chief Executive Officer of Compass Datacenters in Dallas, Texas. Mr. Crosby founded the company in 2011 after years of working at the intersection of technology and real estate development, focusing on delivering scalable, customizable, and sustainable data center infrastructure. Since founding Compass, Mr. Crosby has led the company's growth from completing its first 1.2 megawatt data center in 2012 to developing campus-scale facilities serving hyperscale customers worldwide. Under his leadership, Compass has earned recognition as one of the fastest-growing companies in the country and has become a leader in sustainability and long-term infrastructure development within the data center industry. Mr. Crosby holds a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science from UTA. Thanks for UT Austin, for those not in the 6th District. Thank you for joining us. Our next witness is Mr. Kirk Offel. Mr. Offel is founder and Chief Executive Officer of Overwatch Mission Critical, a strategic data center consulting firm based in Austin, Texas. Mr. Offel has had 2 decades of industry experience, having worked in executive roles with Fortune 1000 companies and major data center providers worldwide. His career includes work with Medtronic, Eaton Corporation, Hewlett-Packard's Technology Services Consulting Practice, and others. In addition to his executive pursuits, Mr. Offel is the founder of the Data Center Austin Conference and the host of the Data Center Revolution podcast. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, having served aboard a nuclear fast attack submarine, and was recognized as a member of the class of 2010 Military Top 40 Under 40. And if I might add, if you are on a fast attack submarine, you have gone to a nuclear power school, and you're smarter than everybody else in the room. And clearly, because of that hair, you are a submariner, not a pilot. I'm looking forward to hearing your testimony. I now recognize Ranking Member Morrison to briefly introduce our last witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Nicol Turner-Lee is a senior fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution and the director of its Center for Technology Innovation. She's an accomplished tech policy expert focusing on equitable access to and impacts of technology with 3 decades of experience in research and advocacy. Her recent work includes a 2024 book titled Digitally Invisible: How the Internet is Creating the New Underclass, and a chapter in the Oxford Handbook on AI Governance. Before her time at Brookings, Dr. Turner-Lee was the Chief Research and Policy Officer at the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council and the Director of the Media and Technology Institute at the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. She's also served on federal advisory commissions such as the Commodity Futures Training Commission Technology Advisory Committee, the Department of Homeland Security's AI Safety Board, and the Federal Communication Commission's Communications Equity and Diversity Council. Dr. Turner-Lee holds a BA from Colgate University and an MA and Ph.D. from Northwestern University. She might compete on the smart front here. Welcome, Dr. Turner-Lee.
Thank you all for being here. Before recognizing the witnesses, I want to remind you that you got 5 minutes. If you go over 5 minutes, I'll start tapping, and then I start screaming after that. I now recognize Mr. Crosby for his 5-minute opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Ellsley. Thank you, Ranking Member Morrison and Chairman Willis. And distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me today to testify on how investments in digital infrastructure is revitalizing rural America. My name is Chris Crosby, and I'm the founder and CEO of Compass Datacenters. After 25 years of working at the intersection of technology and real estate development, I founded Compass in 2011. We design, build, and operate the customizable, scalable, and sustainable foundations of the global hyperscale market. It's vital to distinguish our work from crypto farms or transient AI factories. We build hyperscale campuses, enduring civic infrastructure that supports the banking, cloud computing, AI, and social connectivity services Americans use every day. We're in the middle of the most significant economic transformation since electrification. Data centers are the equivalent, 21st century equivalent of the railroads coming. They are now moving beyond traditional tech corridors into rural communities. They're bringing substantial capital, jobs, and infrastructure investment. There's an outdated myth that data centers only provide temporary construction jobs. In reality, our campuses are 100-year assets. They're part of the communities that they sit in, and they're in a state of constant evolution. In Red Oak, Texas, Chairman's district, located, our investment has triggered a significant butterfly effect. We provide stable work for over roughly 1,500 construction workers during the decade-long build-out and anticipate over 400 permanent, high-paying jobs, operations, maintenance careers, technology careers on the campus. We anchored a new industrial hub by partnering with Schneider Electric to build a 105,000 square foot manufacturing facility next on our campus, in the middle of our campus, creating an additional 350 jobs on the campus. Before our 2021 investment in Red Oak, new sales tax business permits in the municipality grew at a meager 12% annually, which for North Texas is not doing very good. Since we began construction, that growth rate has surged to 43% compounding. Data center campuses function as sustained economic engines, creating a butterfly effect of new restaurants, retail, housing, and other developments within the communities. And if you've driven through Red Oak, Texas, you see the bridges and the construction, and the new schools, and everything else that's coming along with it. On energy, large data centers serve as anchor tenants for the grid. Our national grid averages just about 50% utilization throughout the year. So by utilizing this underused capacity, we help take those fixed costs across more electricity sale and actually do put pressure down on the rates for families and not small business and small businesses to pay less. Let me be very clear on this point. Data centers pay more so that families and small businesses can pay less. There are scenarios where we are regulated to not be able to do that, but that is not for want. At Compass, we go even further with our co-serve model. To quote John Knight, the Assistant Director of Economic Development in Red Oak, Texas, Compass builds redundancy into our grid, supports our infrastructure. I love what data centers are doing to improve our community's quality of life, end quote. We fund transmission lines, substations, and interconnects through upfront contributions in aid of constructions, also known as kayak payments, strengthening the local grid for everybody. However, outdated regulations still limit our ability to contribute even more. We need emission standards that distinguish the cleaner hydrotreated vegetable oil, or HVO, that we use, we pay more for than diesel, from traditional diesel, so that we can stabilize the grid during emergencies without penalty. We don't want black soot going in the air for our communities. We need the EPA to formally classify mandatory grid curtailments as emergencies, allowing us to support the grid, be grid resources during extreme weather events like this coming week, and without risking compliance violations. And we need regulatory flexibility to allow more proactive private funding for long-term grid and infrastructure. That's private funding for grid infrastructure. Compass is built to last, which is why we invest deeply in our people and our communities. We partner with Texas State Technical College to create a scholarship pathway into high-tech, high-paying roles that don't require four-year degrees. The program is now scaling nationally. We're in our second cohort. We also work with veteran-focused organizations like Overwatch and Salute to place skilled military talent and data center careers close to home. Environmentally, we preserve local resources by mandating water-free cooling since 2012 to protect our agricultural water supplies. In conclusion, Compass does not seek a free ride. We come with a multi-generational commitment to prosperity in each of our communities, ensuring that the AI revolution empowers every corner of our nation. I thank the committee for the opportunity to testify and for your leadership on this important topic, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Chris. Now I recognize Mr. Offel for his 5-minute opening remarks.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. As an industry, we did not communicate early enough or often enough about our data center plans, and that created avoidable concerns. We didn't clearly explain what we were building, why it mattered, or how communities would benefit, and we relied on the trust we hadn't yet earned. We're fixing it by increasing transparency, tightening our outreach, and making sure every community and stakeholder understands the mission, the safeguards, and the benefits. We know trust is earned, and you'll see that reflected in how we engage moving forward. My name is Kirk Offel. I'm the CEO of Overwatch, and I'm proud to be a service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Before I ever set foot in a data center, I spent 5 years in the U.S. Navy serving aboard the U.S. nuclear fast attack submarine, the USS Memphis. That experience taught me something simple. You don't accomplish big missions with big slogans. You accomplish them with small, highly capable teams who know how to execute. And that's exactly what's happening in the AI boom today. Let me be blunt. Small businesses are the backbone of this entire industry. I'm saying the AI boom does not happen without us, period. Today, more than 75% of the whole AI infrastructure ecosystem is driven by small businesses. We are the ones building AI factories. We are the ones pulling fiber, erecting steel, trenching conduit, fabricating components, hauling equipment, running logistics, and delivering professional services that keep projects moving. As our grid gets pushed harder than ever before, it won't be a big company flying in from out of state fixing that. It'll be a local electrician, local line crews, local engineering firms, and local contractors, small businesses that actually understand the communities that they serve. We're going to see new small businesses pop up in manufacturing, equipment rental, transportation, environmental services, permitting, legal, security, cleaning, maintenance, you name it. And all the indirect jobs, housing, food, retail, childcare, all grow because of this work, and we've seen this before. Every major leap in American infrastructure has had the same outcome. Small businesses become the biggest winners. They grew with the railroad era. They scaled during the electrification of America. They expanded through the construction of the interstate system, and they absolutely exploded during the automobile revolution. Each of those moments didn't just change the country, they created millions of small businesses that reshaped the American workforce. And today we are living through what I believe is the fifth industrial revolution, a revolution powered by data, intelligence, and people who build and sustain the infrastructure behind it. AI factories are no different. They are simply the 21st century version of those earlier transformations, and they will become the next great engine of American small business growth. Let me put some numbers behind that. For every $100 billion we invest in building digital infrastructure, we get $800 million in local tax revenue, 500,000 new jobs, $40 billion in labor income, and that's a $140 billion boost to the U.S. GDP. Now I want to address the concerns we all hear: energy, water, environmental impact, and job creation. All valid concerns. They deserve our attention, and they're beginning to get monitored very closely. But the answer is not to hit the brakes. The answer is the same answer we used when we built the railroads, electricity, cars, and the roads. We govern it, we guide it, and we build it more responsibly. People forget this, but the first cars were horribly inefficient, wildly polluting, incredibly dangerous, and brutal on city infrastructure. So what did we do? We built smarter, we built safer, we set standards, and we improved efficiency. Progress doesn't happen because we avoid the challenge. It happens because we take it head on. That is the American way. Today we have 5,400 data centers in the U.S. That's the most in the world. Hyperscale capacity has doubled in the last 5 years, and we're staring down the barrel of $5 trillion in construction over the next 5 years. The industry is on track to triple by the end of the decade, and for the first time ever, we have the ability to retrofit the past, to take older facilities and make them just as efficient as the new data centers we build today. AI factories are the most transformational infrastructure America has ever attempted to build. Henry Ford enabled the movement of people and goods. AI factories enable the movement of data, intelligence, and services. And once again, they're going to create millions of small business opportunities, just like cars did, just like the railroads did, just like electricity did. But here's the part that matters the most, and this is where my Navy background speaks up. If we don't build this infrastructure here, if we don't scale it, and if we don't support it with American labor and American small businesses, those jobs and that technology are going overseas. And they'll go to countries who have worse environmental standards, less transparency, and strategic interests directly opposing our own. This is not just an economic issue. This is a national security issue. So to the committee, I'll leave you with a piece of history. Energy has never been a reason for us to stop. It's a reason for America to lead. Growth isn't a threat. It's an opportunity. And small businesses, they're not just part of this story. We are the story. Empower us, and we will build the next generation of American infrastructure. Fail to empower small businesses, and we will fall behind nations that would love nothing more than to take our place. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Kirk. Now I recognize Dr. Turner Lee for her 5-minute statement.
Chairman Elzey, Ranking Member Morrison, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify today. AI is changing the way we work, how we learn, get well, and interact online, as well as emboldening other transformative cases like speeding up the development of scientific discoveries and better evaluating climate impacts. But not all consumers have full access to AI, especially those with limited internet access or who lack the digital skills to utilize it in their lives. Rural communities, especially small businesses and farms, have been historically left behind when it comes to technological innovation and can benefit from what AI offers. With vast topography, rural areas tend to have the land needed to support physical data centers. Technology can create avenues for economic development in areas like rural that are experiencing declines in population and farming assets, as well as insufficient access to high-speed broadband. Data centers have gotten increased visibility as economic drivers, but this will only be the case if they're built in ways that are additive to the local community and bring limited harm to residents and local businesses. My testimony, I want to discuss the increasing explosion of data centers, but talk about how they require a national framework for resources, security, permitting, and community benefits. State and local leaders, business owners, employees, and residents should participate in planning and implementation together with technology companies, big or small. Communities must be actively involved at the onset of data center development and have transparency to assess the impacts of electricity, water, noise, and light pollution, jobs, land use, tax revenues, all of which I detail in my written statement. With the various types of facilities, including enterprise, hyperscale, co-location, and edge, technology companies are investing in larger facilities for greater computing power. More compute requires more space, equipment, electricity, and water, resulting in a set of unknown environmental hazards that we have yet to realize. Some tech companies are greatly benefiting from the explicit support of the president right now, whose favorable stance towards more data centers to compete with China has expedited permitting and bypassed environmental remediations as part of the tenets of the AI Action Plan. However, the current administration has also threatened to rescind federal funding to states if they stand in the way of AI deployments, and just in December, the White House issued an order making states ineligible for BEAD non-deployment funds if they threaten such. Threats to states through moratoriums and lawsuits are counterintuitive to the ultimate goal for having data centers in the first place, leaving communities without agency in conversations involving not just data centers, but broadband in their community. More importantly, we must listen to communities. Data centers have been the central focus of some gubernatorial and state legislature campaigns during recent elections in New Jersey and Virginia and other places, where consumers saw rising electricity rates coincide with unprecedented demand for new data centers. A middle ground must be met to balance the needs of advanced technologies with the demands of residents who just seek clarity, buy-in, and oversight in these data centers that are being built in their backyard. Further, communities should not feel the drain of data centers on their natural and generated resources, and with the environmental impacts still largely unknown, we need to make sure that the rollbacks that we made in the Biden-Harris administration in terms of clean and renewable energy sources do not have disproportionate impacts in the future. I want to also say about job creation. Though we know that the rate of jobs are temporary and in some cases will not scale to the size of the data center itself, it's important for the rural workforce to be involved. Right now, rural workers are lacking in areas of trade as well as construction. These challenges offer opportunities for government agencies, businesses, and local governments to collaborate on solving those workforce shortages and rooting training in ways that those people stay in the community and become the pipeline for rural communities going forward. Data centers cannot be selective as well when it comes to who works within the facility itself. Small businesses should have the opportunity to bid on contracts for food services, security, and maintenance. And if these jobs are primarily remote, we need to ensure that broadband is available so that people who live in rural communities do not have to go to, as I found in my book, local hotels and 50 miles away to just access their jobs. There must be some foresight, my friends, about the long-term impact on surrounding communities, the environment, and overall resilience. This is especially important as fears over potential AI bubble escalate and feed the possibility of stranded assets in communities that essentially have given the green light to data centers along with millions of dollars in tax incentives. Communities should be asking about the plans for stranded or deserted buildings, how they can be repurposed and better integrated into the community, or else we're going to find ourselves like China with a lot of idle buildings. I envelop my remarks around this idea that data centers should be responsibly and ethically designed and built, and I leave this committee with my closing thoughts. Ensure early collaboration among all of the all the utilities, energy, water, and telecom, and even real estate. Develop community benefit agreements that resolve and make major public concerns around data centers transparent. Focus on job creation. Consider smaller data centers when appropriate. They don't need to be big. Create safeguards for communities and allow communities the opportunity to say no when they want to say no and they do not feel that they are involved. Thank you again to the members of the subcommittee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll now move to the member questions under the 5-minute rule. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. Chris, Texas has emerged as a leading state for data center development because it's got affordable land, it's got plenty of energy, and it's got an understandable and relatively easy regulatory climate. What else makes Texas attractive to data centers?
The growable workforce that comes with it. As we continue to bring new people into the data center space, we call it the new collar workforce. The ability to attract employment in Texas is fantastic. And when we launched the vocational school in conjunction with Texas State Technical College, went through the first cohort. Immediately the first class is all hired. Second class is already pre-hired. That's going on right now. We have a workforce where we've got youth, we've got new people coming in, and in these communities like Red Oak, the commitment and the partnership with the local community really helps with that front. That can-do attitude in Texas has been fantastic.
Well, if it's predictable, does that reduce uncertainty for you long-term for these data centers and their success?
It's a great question. We look at things that we don't exit. There's a big difference if you build to exit versus build to last. You make a lot better decisions, just like if you're going to remodel your home, and you build it to flip it, or you remodel to flip it versus you remodel to stay in that home. And that's where a lot of great sustainability decisions get made. We view ourselves as 100-year campuses. These facilities will have multiple refreshes over that time frame, both from an IT technology as well as from a mechanical and electrical plant. And they're going to be long-term parts of those communities. They're living, breathing, active machines in those communities. So it is that when you have certainty and you know that you can have that, you can make the multi-billion-dollar type of investments that we make and look at it in the 40-plus year horizons that we look at it from an investment perspective.
And you mentioned John Knight. So you built this data center with the encouragement and the cooperation and the oversight of the local government, correct?
That's correct.
So they're fully on board with everything you're doing. This didn't need to come from Congress. This didn't need to come from Austin. They did it themselves, and they know you're going to be an integral part of the community already, right?
That's a huge part of our selection criteria. We want to go to the places where people are. I can't speak for all developers. There's Class A development, and there's not. But when you're doing the right thing and you want to put long-term investment, you don't want to have people picketing a site that you're planning to try to get somebody to stay in for 30 years. Who wants to go work in a community like that? We go to the places where they welcome the investment, they welcome the transformation of their communities. And like I said, I think it's akin to having, the railroad was probably pretty loud back in the 1800s. And the communities that passed on that, it didn't work out so well for them. Those that passed on the federal highway system, those that passed on the international airports in the 70s, it did not work out long-term for those communities, and data centers are that now. We are, AI is like electricity. We don't know all the applications that's going to be used for. It is a foundational tool, and it's going to continue to create opportunities.
Speaking of opportunities, Kirk, tell me about how veterans meet the threshold for what you're looking for in these data centers.
I appreciate the question, Mr. Chairman. We talk about data centers because it's measured in mission critical. Mission critical means that you could quantify the downtime in dollars or death behind 1 second of lost infrastructure. I would argue that everyone that's put on the uniform and took the oath has once entered into a mission critical environment that isn't measured in downtime, but it's measured in their own mortality. The state of Texas, and what Chris was saying and why it's such a robust state, the sky for the cloud is Northern Virginia, but the home for AI will be Texas. It has 116 higher educational platforms, 15 military bases, and 4 of the most populous cities in the United States. Not to mention it has more natural resources than any other state in the union, including Alaska and Montana. So we have the best access to the biggest workforce. There's a massive amount of veterans coming out of the military that have been exposed to the most advanced weapons, machine and technology ever built. And the military is best known for being one of the largest leadership incubators ever built. So we are not only, this industry does not, it's not lacking genius or intelligence, it does lack leadership, it lacks courage, and veterans are trained and conditioned and pressure tested in all 3. So I think that veterans have the highest likelihood. I have 3 kids that are in college right now, and I tell them that college degree is about as useful as a taxi medallion in a few years, because you could spend 4 years in the military and find yourself with a higher demand of opportunity that has the highest overall total earning potential versus something that you could find today going to college.
Nailed it. Nailed it.
Thank you.
Okay. Now recognize Dr. Morrison for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Turnerly, are data centers being constructed to meet current demand or anticipated demand? And if the tech bubble does pop, will these data centers still be necessary?
Thank you for that question, Ranking Member. I do think that data centers are necessary. I mean, the current compute demand of AI is out the box, right, in terms of everything that we're doing every day, as well as what we're trying to do with future scientific discovery. I also think that it's still unclear whether or not we're going to be able to grow these functions in the future into the current data center assets that we're building in the present. And so I think we need to have the type of assessments that are done to sort of have some predictability in marketplace of how we're going to foresee that growth. But I also think that, you know, there are other types of data centers that can be built to accommodate what we're talking about with AI.
Thank you for that. And what would happen to these data centers and the associated jobs if the tech bubble does pop?
One of my fears, and we've written about this at the Brookings Institution, myself and Darrell West, my colleague, is that we do need to have programs that leave workforce opportunities within rural communities after the life of the data center. So it's particularly important that we have programs that sustain themselves, where those carpenters and electricians and welders are receiving training as well as recertification using AI, and they're able to bring that asset back into their communities post the life of this one infrastructure asset.
Thank you. The Environmental Protection Agency has announced that it will no longer consider the health benefits of reducing air pollution and regulations, still shocking to say those words, cutting human health protections in favor of the fossil fuel industry. I'm a physician by trade, and I'm deeply concerned about the health impacts of air pollution. Given these rollbacks, how could air pollution from fossil fuels and backup diesel generators spurred by data centers affect public health in rural areas?
I definitely think the use of the word public health is meaningful in this conversation. I think given the community response to the environmental concerns. With that being the case, as you've mentioned, the rollback on the $11 billion in Biden-Harris investments for its clean and renewable energies is a setback, and we want to make sure that we're not setting back the progress, because I think most tech companies, including my colleagues here, want as much as electricity as possible and want to tap into every electron. With that being the case, when workers are sick in rural communities because of these environmental impacts, small businesses suffer. When young people are sick due to our asthma and other related environmental illnesses, they don't go to school. And so we want to make sure that we're not having a bigger impact, I think, on the community, given the fact that we know very little about the environmental impacts.
Thank you for that. How much electricity and water does the smallest hyperscale data center consume?
Well, I will say this because I am not a scientist by trade, I'm a sociologist, but we do know hyperscalers do not exceed, and my colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong, about 100 megawatts in terms of electricity. We also have to consider the off-site electricity that is used. Some tech companies are being responsible. We've seen that with Microsoft in terms of trying to figure out ways to build substations or take advantage of other electricity outlets. But again, it's not just the building where the electricity is being consumed. It could be other buildings across the community that have to power and generate the same amount of power, generate and consume the same amount of energy.
And what about water? How much water is used?
Yeah, water is tricky as well. Based on the size of the data center, we still see a continuous flow of water. Again, given the fact that there's been advancements in science when it comes to closed loop systems or using recycled water, I'm very excited about these opportunities. Again, water consumption is critical. Data centers have to be cooled. And if they are not cooled, it sort of takes the whole investment and throws it out in the wayside.
I'm glad you referenced that. So depending on what cooling systems a data center uses, because they use different ones, it may consume even more water or more electricity. Can you just briefly walk us through the trade-offs of each type of cooling system?
Well, we already know that we have an outdated and archaic national water irrigation system, so I think that is a cause of concern. I also think what's interesting, too, is that we probably need to use, Ranking Member, more AI to help us to monitor the type of water that is going into these units, as well as ways in which we can save residential households money, by the consumption. Communities that are adjacent to data centers are really not getting, I think, the best of AI when it comes to these water and energy consumption measures.
Thank you very much, and I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Doctor. I now recognize Mr. Finstad from Minnesota for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Elzey. Thanks for holding this important hearing today, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. As the representative from the 1st District of Minnesota, a district that is founded on farming, healthcare, manufacturing, and small businesses, which have helped sustain our rural areas, innovation is more than just a slogan to us. It's a way of life. With the rising demand for artificial intelligence, data centers are moving to rural areas like the ones I represent in southern Minnesota because of the availability of land, our climate, we're nice and cold, especially right now in Minnesota, and our access to power. For my district, data centers can be economic anchors in their regions, improving local supply chains and providing job opportunities for skilled tradespeople. At the same time, I want to acknowledge that the concerns that I'm hearing from my constituents regarding energy and water consumption, affordability, grid reliability, particularly from farmers and small business owners and families. People want assurances that new energy-intensive developments won't increase their utility bills or put a strain on local power and water systems. This hearing today is about ensuring that rural districts like mine are ready to take advantage of innovation while solving real problems like labor shortages and energy security. I look forward to the discussion today and learning more about ways we can empower rural America to lead on this next wave of innovation. So with that, just a couple of questions. Mr. Crosby, many of my constituents in southern Minnesota are concerned, have questions, maybe just don't know for sure. In regards to, I guess the questions I hear is really, the big energy-intensive facilities like data centers, they're new to us. They may increase electricity prices or put stress on our local grids. We just heard a little bit about the water discussion. You've made the case that data centers can serve as an anchor tenant that reduces costs by spreading out fixed infrastructure costs and making upfront grid upgrade payments through contribution in aid of construction. So what's your company doing to ensure that data centers and development in rural areas does not increase energy costs for community members and small businesses?
Thank you for your question. We do not go to these environments and look for the environments to pay us on these. So we build infrastructure. We've bought land and transferred it to the utility company for easements. We pay for transmission. We've paid for switching stations, substations, and the like. That's our infrastructure that we are utilizing. Almost every single time that involves additional infrastructure, such as in Red Oak, that other parts of the community can use that we pay for in order to bring it there. So additional switches on a switching station, for example. The other aspect to this is that we are trying to work as well with the regulatory bodies on trying to get data centers to become grid resources. So we're going through this cold snap right now. During Storm Uri, if data centers had been allowed by law and not threatened with criminal penalties to operate, 12 people would not have died during Storm Uri in the state of Texas. We can be stabilizing distributed islanded bodies. I will tell you not 100% of my colleagues would say the same thing, but all of the Class A folks will absolutely look at that as we can be the stabilizing factor for the grid. When we do that, we utilize infrastructure that's not being used right now, because it's 50% utilization when it's not during those peak time frames. So you have a very small amount of hours per year where if we could be utilized by grid operators, we could actually reduce down costs for consumers and stabilize the grid with it being our nickel.
Thank you for that. Mr. Offel, in your opening comments, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about we probably haven't done a good enough job explaining what the opportunities are, what the real economics look like, what the risk and reward is in this new emerging industry. I like to say around the halls in this town, you start talking about data centers, AI, cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, and you get a glazed look over a lot of people's eyes. And these are policymakers that are hopefully in a position to educate themselves and make decisions on the very issue that we're talking about. So if we have a problem here in the halls of Congress understanding some of the details of what we're trying to do in this next generation of opportunities, it's easy to assume that our neighbors are having that same issue of understanding. So maybe do you have some thoughts about how we as policymakers, but how the industry is taking strides to make sure that we can talk to our neighbors about what does this mean in our backyard in regards to energy and water and the value that it adds to communities?
Yeah, Thank you, sir, and I appreciate the question. I think this is a great opportunity for us to reshape the mindset and the way that we view this. So I'd ask you as this committee to flip the binoculars around and open up the aperture and let us revisit this. I think this is something that people tend to be very scared of because some of these things that they've been introduced, like the type of technologies you talked about, are very faddish, where what we're talking about today is a data center which will have, it's a transformational infrastructure that'll have a greater impact on humanity since we've seen in powered flight. This is something that's coming and it's coming to stay. So I think that if we can pause, I think that we could help people become more educated, and as we do that, they're going to become less fearful of what these data centers are. And we shouldn't see them as a building. Data centers aren't a building. Look at them as a career field and an opportunity to build back the middle class with high-paying jobs that don't require college degrees. Thank you for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Goodlander from New Hampshire for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Morrison, for convening this important hearing. To our witnesses, thank you so much for being here today. We're on a really good streak with this committee because yesterday we passed 2 common sense bipartisan bills that go to the core issues around small businesses and artificial intelligence. And I couldn't agree more with my colleague from Minnesota. The Congress should be spending as much time as possible on this important issue. This is a transformational issue. We've never seen a revolution quite like this AI revolution. You know, when we talk about data centers and other innovation-driven investments in rural areas, and I represent the most beautiful district in the nation, a very rural district, where I hear every day about the pain people are feeling from high costs across the board. My priority is to make sure that these projects, that these innovations aren't going to shift new burdens and new unbearable costs onto hardworking people who are already feeling a whole lot of pain right now. When we talk about energy costs and data centers, you know, I start from the premise that New Hampshire has some of the highest energy costs in our country. You know, this week we are on track to have some of the coldest days of winter to date, and the people I represent cannot bear higher electricity bills, higher energy costs. I appreciate the testimony of our witnesses so far. Dr. Turnerly, I wanted to ask you how you would advise Congress to think about the real ways in which data centers, actions we can take to make sure that no costs are shifted in an inappropriate way onto people who just cannot bear the pain of higher costs right now.
Thank you very much for that, Representative. And I agree, affordability is a huge concern for many consumers that are sort of resisting data centers to date. It's important for Congress to continue to have the dialogues that we're having around updating and modernizing the energy grid. Clearly, this is a conversation of 20, 25 years ago, and we're putting on top of a outdated energy grid more resources that I think will continue to strain those communities. I also think it's important for public utility commissions to be at the table in these conversations because they set the rates for rate payers, and it's also important for tech companies who are coming in and draining some of those assets to talk with PUCs, local governments, and consumers, actually, to figure out ways in which they can set clear standards and rates for what electricity should look like. I mentioned earlier what Microsoft has done, for example, recently in their announcement about a community AI first, is to have set in certain rates that they pay, whether or not there's a variable increase or decrease in energy consumption. And we need to see more of that so that they're footing the bill as opposed to everyday Americans.
Well, I want to ask also about water security and water costs, because when we look at utility bills in New Hampshire, what we've seen in so many of the towns I represent, particularly in the southern part of my state, big foreign corporations have come into New Hampshire, polluted our water, eliminated our wells. The costs of clean water have never been higher in our state. In your testimony, Dr. Turnerly, you speak about water impacts as impacts that aren't often fully understood until after a project has become underway. I hope you might be able to speak a little bit more about that, to your really important point that we need to be clear about the costs up front. What can and should Congress be doing to make sure that we've got clarity and that we're putting all our tools to use to make sure that these important developments don't actually undermine core function of government, which is to make sure we've got clean water for our citizens?
I appreciate that question, and as I've said in my oral statement as well as written, it's important that Congress support states and allow them to be part of the negotiating table. You know, when we put barriers for Congress, for state leaders to sort of actively think about how these data centers are positioned in their community, we actually burden them as well, and we remove them from the table. So I think Congress should really move away from moratoriums and restrictions on states to be actually involved. I think community benefit agreements might be another way for us to negotiate out these speculative opportunities that are being promoted to communities. Lancaster, Pennsylvania, for example, just did a $20 million community benefits agreement that also includes quality of life factors, air quality, water consumption, other educational assets, jobs. We need to see Congress promote and support states actually engaging those community benefit agreements, because I think it will get to the broader question that you're asking, Representative, which is how do you just put everything in the bucket and make sure communities come out safe when this is all said and done?
Well, thank you so much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Chairman Williams for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks again to the group for being here today. Mr. Crosby, the data center boom has led to some growing pains, especially in meeting the workforce demand. However, the industry is already taking steps to address this challenge. Now, what steps have Compass Data Centers taken to build partnerships, including public-private partnerships and career and technical education programs to address workforce needs?
Thank you for your question. The Texas State Technical College and ourselves, we were looking for a partner to start a school. We scholarshiped the school, and then we brought in all of our partners, all of our suppliers, our customers, and our competitors that now all sponsor this program. It's called MEI. It's based in Red Oak. We are now also donating a facility a little later this year on the campus to allow the students to have a place to practice it, in which not only our client but also our equipment suppliers are donating equipment for them to be able to work on it. We plan to replicate this model in multiple markets where we have these levels of investment. These are, when all-in type investments are north of $20 billion, you need a long-term workforce. This is something that we work very closely with. We've had great work with Ellis County and Red Oak. Officials have been super supportive of it as well. I think the private-public partnership is a very easy way to do this.
Okay. How do you interact with local communities before beginning to build data centers to ensure there's an equal partner and valued stakeholder? We've talked about communications. You can't have any, you can never be too short on communications, so.
That's right. The challenges that have been brought up by the doctor are not, I would say they're not very common today, but they are still they still come up. And when you do not engage with these communities properly, so for example, when we walk into a community, a lot of people have a myth that these are going to use a lot of water. It's not true. We don't use water at our facilities for those purposes. So we'll end up in these meetings. We engage with this community. We sit in the meetings with the hearings, the public hearings, answer their questions. Our most recent one we had in Statesville, North Carolina, we had people that had no stickers that took their no stickers off at the end of it as they learned more facts. The key is education, and the key is doing the right thing for that community. That means you've got to be built to last. You cannot be built to exit in this business.
Yeah, sometimes you get one crack at it, and you got to get it right.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Offel, the growth of the data center industry has brought massive demand for trade skills. We've been talking about that all day here. However, the demand for electricians, HVAC technicians, and plumbers has outpaced supply. And I know in Texas we're short of welders. We always are short of welders. Now, your business, Overwatch Mission Critical, is actively working to address this problem. What methods have you found most effective in developing the necessary workforce to grow this economy in your industry?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. It's simple. We have tried to approach this from multiple dimensions. One was with a bunch of Band-Aids. We tried to figure out how we can transfer people that were in adjacent verticals of industry into this industry, and we realized that the adoption rate of emerging technology, specifically driven because of the surge of AI, has allowed us to discover that strategy is no longer tenable. I'm at a point right now where we need to create another apprentice program. This is the fifth utility. We need to have an apprenticeship and journeyman program associated just to this. We need our own dedicated apprentice program, and we've partnered with a group, a small business, veteran-owned small business in Dallas, Texas, and we have partnered with them to create an incubator that could put 1,200 people through that program a year that'll be certified in data centers. They could join the workforce immediately and be a data center apprentice.
There's 10,000 kids a year dropping out of, or 100,000 kids a year dropping out of school in Texas in the 9th grade. They're losing hope. And we got to be able to show them that it's not about being architects, business people, whatever, plumbers, welders, carpenters, technicians. It's important you do this because we can save a lot of kids that are not dropping out of school and we're losing them. So
The largest demand for labor is in this vertical. This industry grows faster than every other industry on this planet because the growth of every other industry on this planet. And there's no sense sending our kids to college for data centers. But whatever they would be exposed to or learn their freshman year would be obsolete by the time they graduated. There's 6 weeks, 12 weeks, and 18-week programs that are designed for high school kids, as well as the 17,000 people leaving the military on active duty every month. There's a large, massive workforce of trained people coming out of the military that we are looking to adopt, and those people will help us lay out a roadmap to where we could support people transitioning right out of high school. They just don't know the industry yet, and right now everybody is telling them that they need to be scared about it. We need to fix it.
well, in time remain, take it to them because there's these 100,000 kids need to have an opportunity. And they'll hire their friend too. Mr.
Yes, sir.
Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Olszewski from Maryland for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman Elzey, to Ranking Member Morrison, and to all of our witnesses today. I appreciate your time and your presence. My district in Maryland is home to many beautiful rural communities in both Baltimore and Carroll counties, which affords our state flourishing farmland and engaged small businesses. Agricultural preservation is a top priority for our district since 1980. Carroll County alone has preserved nearly 81,000 acres with over $200 million invested. Prior to coming to Congress as Baltimore County Executive, I helped push our number to over 71,000 acres of farmland preserved. In Maryland, our farms account for billions of dollars of economic activity. They are a critical part of our history and our economy. Although we do not currently have a data center in Maryland, there are plans to have one under development in Frederick County, and others are being considered across our state. For more than a year now, Baltimore, Frederick, and Carroll counties have been contending, frankly fighting, a proposed 67-mile high voltage transmission line known as the Maryland Piedmont Reliability Project, or MPRP, needed to fuel power in data centers in Northern Virginia. Power that we worry, frankly, is simply being transferred from Peach Bottom, Pennsylvania, to Northern Virginia. Sadly, our questions to clarify this have gone completely unanswered, both by PJM and by the project's developer. Worse, eminent domain has been proposed. So unfortunately, that reliability doesn't seem to cover the Maryland rural communities who are facing the project's burden. Even worse, to Ms. Goodlander's point, the cost of this project, $424 million, would fall on Maryland ratepayers who were already crushed under a cost of living crisis and increasingly high utility costs in our state. I understand that transmission lines play a role in modernizing the electrical grid. However, my constituents and I have been very vocal in expressing these concerns. Our communities have worked for decades with millions of local and state dollars invested to conserve this land for future generations, to preserve the economic activity on these lands. Now they're being told it must be sacrificed and their livelihoods disrupted for a transmission line that won't even offer them benefits, and yet these constituents are being asked to pay for it. I guess I just open with a question for all. Is that fair? Does that make sense?
Well, I'll start, Representative, and I want to also say to you, Maryland does have beautiful farmland. I spent a lot of time in Garrett County, Maryland, as part of my book with farmers as well as small businesses, entrepreneurs, and residents. The Transmission Line project I do write about in my written statement, and I think it is one of those examples where we do see a lack of coordination between all the actors. And I do agree with my colleagues, a lack of transparency when it comes to information about what is being done and what is being built. The revenue should come on the side of the companies, not the taxpayers.
Yep.
Because the revenue that comes from the companies can take those communities, even though they don't have a data center, but they can possibly build, a better school, a better firehouse, better broadband, for that matter. And so I do say to you, I do not think it's fair that the community is sort of left in the dark and are going through several challenges to understand why, when, how this project is actually going to pan out for
I
them.
appreciate that and you including it in your written testimony. Gentlemen.
Yes, thank you. I agree with a lot of your points. I don't think it's fair for us to come to communities and just say it's on you as a community. Those days were decades ago. There are a lot of new players that are doing that sort of technique, and check their capitalization and check their track record. That's what I would say if you're a community looking at these groups. The other thing I would state is this should be a very bipartisan issue. Transmission upgrade is absolutely necessary. When we transmit electricity at 69 kV, 130 kV, 90% of it is lost in the air versus high voltage.
Yeah.
90%. That means we don't have to produce more generation. That means we have generation that just gets wasted. And this is one of the biggest things that we should that all parties should rally around. We need to upgrade this. That's the easiest, cheapest way for us to do things. And data centers want to contribute to that. Come to any of our locations, and you will see that brand-new transmission at high
And I
voltage.
appreciate the consensus from two of you. Just with my 30 seconds left, and Mr. Offel, hopefully I'll give you a chance to respond as well. But I just want to put on the record, Mr. Chairman, a 2024 Lazard Levelized Cost of Energy report, as well as a Next Era Energy's 2025 investor presentation. I ask just unanimous consent to enter those into the record. Thank you very much. Just wanted to point out that renewable energy projects, according to these, are both cheaper and faster to get built to help fuel this need. So I appreciate our opportunity to look at that, and I apologize we didn't get to you on the answer there, but really appreciate your testimony. Thank you. I yield back.
And now recognize Mr. Schmidt from Kansas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and like my colleagues, I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. It's a topic not new to you, but still very new to many of the communities that we represent. And it, like a lot of new subjects, as has been suggested here today, it tends to present itself in different ways in different communities. I've listened carefully during the time I've been here to some of the suggestions and responses you've had regarding questions about community engagement, which I appreciate very much. Let me ask just a much more sort of global question on that. So I came out of state government. I'm a state and local control person philosophically, and I believe it in my bones, and I'm certainly not advocating something different here. Having said that, one of you at least compared in your written testimony the development of the data center industry to the development of the railroads. And obviously 150 years ago, that was a nationalized policy conversation that resulted in national control, some of which we still deal with the downstream effects of that today. But it also created a tremendous industry. And I guess I would just ask you to speak either with particularity or philosophically about, as you look forward how this industry is going to grow, what's the right balance between federalizing some of these decisions, standards, requirements, and leaving it to those case-by-case local advocacy decisions? And we can just go down the road, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you. Look, I believe the local is always the first approach. There were comments about water and water usage. Those are negotiated locally. Those are not negotiated on a big basis. So those communities are making those decisions live, and we see that. The state of Texas has an advantage in some ways because FERC is not engaged with some of the things, and the ability to adapt technologies a little bit faster to try new things. I think speed is one of the elements where there is an aspect where you're continually making adjustments, continuous improvement types of items as you get feedback from these sorts of infrastructure investments. We are putting in massive amounts of capital into the ground and into the wires that are going ahead. Building plants, renewables was mentioned. Data centers and data center users have been responsible for over 70% of the PPAs that are around renewables. We are driving change. We want to do the right thing. The top companies definitely do, and let us work with those communities to continue to innovate and come up with these new and creative ways to do things.
Mr. Offel?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. Just to put a pattern together for a bit of history, when we started with the first major infrastructure upgrade in America, the railways, the number one concern was energy, and the number two was environmental impact. And when we did the electrification of the grid, the number one concern was energy, and the number two was the environmental impact. The third was the interstate highway system, and the fourth was the automobile. And in every case, the primary theme has always been energy and what is the impact on environment. And now we're evolving to what are the jobs that are being created as a byproduct of these vertical industries that are emerging. The things that take an industry like ours, which is niche, and today this represents the fact that we're now in the mainstream, is industries that, like the automobile industry, when we were rolling those cars out on the road, they lacked safety, regulation, oversight, governance, regulation, and many would argue ethics. Some of the same things that you are challenging us on, and justifiably so, today. The answer is we have to have a partnership with you. We must be working with all elements of levels of government. And we need to be able to make sure that someday you understand that we're no longer consumers of your utility. We're creators of it, making us partners of it. We will be able to reinforce, and I think in your district, what he was talking about was to have the ability to island ourselves. If we have, since the birth of this vertical, 55 gigs of energy on the grid, we're under construction today for 40 to 80 gigawatts of natural renewable energy, meaning that we will not only put our own energy on the grid and tie it into the grid in a closed transition, allowing us to cogenerate. That gives us not only the ability to move the needle to the left, but we reinforce that grid so that the people that are out in the urban areas aren't at risk of losing power because data center providers are the ones that are building it. And today, with the exception of a few misfit toys, we are at zero water design on data centers. We don't use water for the same reason you don't use water in your radiator, which is a closed-loop system. It doesn't absorb and reject heat fast enough. These data centers are so dense that we can't use water. So we're here to partner with you on creating more water, and we are partners to the utility. We will become a utility ourselves.
Doctor, I have 10 seconds.
Yeah, just 10 seconds. I actually challenge the railroad analogy, so I'll start there, because I think we need to think about the railroad as it allowed rural communities to become transit points for the way in which we were actually moving trade, and data centers that actually may be incentivized to bring more profit to companies versus people. So I want to actually challenge that because I think AI needs more industrial policy in many respects to ensure that we get national benefits. I would just say outside of just the energy policy for the Congress, I think it's important for Congress to also create a certain environment in the marketplace. Tariffs, the availability of critical minerals, our availability to have the aluminum that's going into the building. It's all uncertain right now. And I think those costs could actually be passed on to communities if we actually don't get the certainty of the marketplace right in terms of our congressional policies.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now recognize Ms. Skelton from Michigan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Turner, every 2 years, we pass a Bipartisan Water Resources Development Act, which authorizes the Army Corps of Engineers to address water supply needs and carry out vital infrastructure projects. I'm happy to report that the committee has been hard at work to develop the 7th consecutive bipartisan WRDA to navigate local water resource challenges, boost regional economies, create jobs, and protect our natural environment. What is the importance to our rural communities that WRDA is passed in a bipartisan fashion?
It's extremely important. I have nothing else to say, but I think we do need to keep passing this because that's actually going to allow us to negotiate through some of these challenges that we've been talking about today.
Absolutely. The few operations jobs that data centers create require IT expertise, meaning individuals in career and technical education, careers in technical education will be increasingly in demand. Last week, I introduced my bill, the Honoring Vocational Education Act, which would permanently establish a survey on educational attainment within the skilled technical workforce. It's critical to advancing and maintaining a skilled workforce. We have to ensure that skilled tradespeople and technical workers are fully accounted for in federal workforce data, especially when these jobs are becoming so critical to building and supporting innovation. Again, Dr. Turner-Lee, what is the role of career and technical education in ensuring that these local jobs can be filled and created as data centers are developed?
I completely agree with you. A couple years ago when we had the BEAD money, I did the same thing with broadband because these are livable wage jobs. Yep. They're jobs that we need to build the infrastructure just as the Hoover Dam. We had to build that dam. We have to find workers to do the same thing. I think we need to continue to invest in technical training, but I also want to make sure that there will be jobs that have some IT slant to it because technical jobs, even your greatest plumber has to rely upon AI in some way or form to do their job. And so it's important for us to balance that. How do we actually do the acute, faculty skills alongside making sure rural communities and rural citizens know how to actually maneuver through AI itself.
Absolutely. They go hand in hand and have to be developed together. One last question for you, Dr. Turnerly. In your testimony, you discuss the importance of ensuring early collaboration between utilities, local governments, and their rural communities. Just last month, in my district, a planning meeting for a data center in Kent County was canceled due to overcapacity, with hundreds of residents showing up to make their voices heard in these discussions. How can we, as members of Congress, help facilitate and support these conversations to ensure that residents aren't left in the dark as planning for these data centers continues?
Well, I want to agree with my colleagues, particularly my colleagues who are in a space where they're working every day with some of these local communities, and I commend them on the efforts that they have put forth. I do think Congress should put out some type of data center literacy act, something that allows people to know that this next stage of innovation, if we're comparing it to the railroads, is an all-in project.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to be at the table. I think we're seeing these rooms full to the brim because people are really worried. They're worried about the things that they know based on what the media is telling them. They're worried about the things that they don't know.
Yep.
I think it's an easy fix if we actually find ways to raise their literacy around what data centers are, what they do. And I actually would say that we connect this to AI literacy bills.
Yep.
So people know that when there's a data center in your neighborhood, there's a benefit to you as well.
Yeah.
And you know what you can access and do.
Absolutely. I'm already working on something like that with one of my colleagues from Michigan. We'd love to run it by you, get your input on it as well. So thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you. I
yield
look
back.
forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Weed from Wisconsin for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of the witnesses for being here today. We appreciate the work each of you are doing to shape the future of America's digital infrastructure and the communities that support it. Across the country, we're seeing a rapid growth in data centers driven by the accelerating demand for AI. Increasingly, these facilities are choosing rural communities, creating new opportunities in skilled trades, construction, and facility operations, offering a pathway to stable middle-class careers in regions that have too often been left behind. At the same time, this expansion brings real challenges, from meeting the energy needs of these facilities to the increase in workforce demands. Small businesses are central to this story. They are the contractors, suppliers, and service providers who make these projects possible and who stand to benefit long after construction ends. As AI demand centers continue to grow, it is my hope that we can find solutions that balance the needs of tech entrepreneurs while also protecting the rights and the voices of course, our local communities. Mr. Crosby, we'll start with you. In your testimony, you said that data centers act as anchor tenants that put downward pressure actually on electricity rates, and that is one of the biggest concerns. We have a project in northeastern Wisconsin that was the community was very, very involved. That was one of the big concerns, electricity rates. Could you expand and walk us through, how rural taxpayers actually could see savings?
Yes, in states where it is not regulated that they have to share everything with consumers. So there are states and regions in the country that it is forced to be shared. So even if you wanted to foot your own bill, you are not allowed to foot your own bill. It is forced onto consumers. In those other states that is not the case, you can, one is the connection interconnect charges. That's paying to bring the power to you. That's what we pay for. Those charges to do that. The second is, how do the rates come down? So keep that first cost off of bringing the transmission to you. Now, how do the rates come down? Because if we can utilize existing infrastructure, the grid runs at about 50% right now. And if we can use that infrastructure for the vast majority of the year, in a state like Wisconsin, you might have 20 hours a year of peak power out of 8,760 hours. That means we could be utilizing that capacity and then island ourselves during those times where the grid operator says it's a tough environment. Go ahead and come off the grid. We don't want consumers to. We don't want there to be anything to hurt the grid. That's a grid stability. If you're using infrastructure that's already built and paid for, it will drive down costs for consumers. We have seen that. Southern Company, Chris Womack's company, they put out a report there about that. PGE put out a report. Maureen Pope. We work very closely with utilities, EPRI, EEI. We are trying to get the regulatory environments to allow us to pay for what we want, pay for the power that we want to use, and help us drive down these costs.
You also mentioned another thing that I've heard a lot with this most recent one in our community is depletion of the aquifer. You mentioned that Compass mandates water-free cooling technology to protect agriculture water supplies. Can you explain what that looks like in practice?
Yeah, I grew up in the state of Texas. Water's always been a precious resource. We were one of the very early adopters of saying no water. A lot of evaporative cooling was used in the space. That got eliminated several years ago, but for a few, as Kirk liked to say, misfit toys, and then some that are using evaporative cooling but creating water positive environments where they are investing in and replenishing aquifers more than what they use. I do not think it is a valid claim anymore to say with a blanket statement that data centers use water. I reject the premise of that.
Let's go to Mr. Offel. I think, you acknowledged that the industry hasn't communicated very well with local communities, and I feel, we don't want them blindsided. So from your point of view, no question we need early engagement, and engagement is very important in these types of things. What does early engagement look like to you? How do we ensure that rural residents, they feel informed rather than blindsided?
That's a fair question, and their concerns are extremely valid. We're not trivializing those. The only way to solve it was with immersion. There's three different types of audiences that we need to address. There's no silver bullet answer that will make everybody happy. We need to convert the way that we view these things as something that is just a consumer of utilities, and we need to help them understand what AI means to them as a human being. How does it help them? As a small business, AI gives me the ability to compete against the Goliaths of this world because it level sets the playing field. Plus, for those people that want to be in the game, it opens up better career opportunities because it lowers the barrier to entry to market for new jobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you all. I now recognize Dr. Morrison for a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on a very amiable hearing. I think this has been a really interesting and important conversation. I'm grateful to the witnesses for your presence. We've talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly, in some cases, parts of the data center boom. It's a very nuanced topic, and there are so many ways that data centers play with existing issues, such as tariffs, which are crushing our main streets and industries. We have recent evidence that supports what economists have been saying from the beginning of this chaotic tariff war, that Americans pay them in taxes. 96% of tariffs have been paid for by Americans over this past year. And the immigration crackdown, choking our workforce and entrepreneurs, and as someone from the Twin Cities, literally terrorizing our communities. I intend to submit further questions for the record. I hope to keep the conversation going down the line. There's so much to discuss. Thanks so much again to the witnesses for your insights. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I recognize myself for a closing statement. I'm so proud to have data centers in my rural community just south of Dallas. There was a lot of concern at the very beginning about what does this mean, this new technology, this new horizon of ours in technology and AI and everything that goes with it. I understand the fear of some of my colleagues on particularly the eastern seaboard, which is stretched thin with energy, power, and water, and lines, and so many other things. I'm here to tell you that if you are interested in seeing what they really do, how they really contribute to our communities, Doctor, come visit us in Red Oak and Midlothian for a couple days. Stick around. These gentlemen would be happy to host you, and so would I. As I look at the city of Red Oak, which is growing by leaps and bounds because of industry coming there, a talented workforce, all of the people in that community are benefiting from these data centers coming to them. From construction, from flipping burgers, from Walmart, from Brookshire's, to home builders, to everybody else in between, and a strong, stable tax base to provide excellent schools, excellent public schools for our kids. They're not drawing on the water. They're adding to the power. They're adding security in a lot of rural communities that, in many cases in Texas and elsewhere, those rural communities are looking for a reason to survive, and many of them are struggling. This new technology gives them an opportunity to do so. They're doing so responsibly with the cooperation of state and local governments. and they're an incredible benefit to the state of Texas and to Red Oak, Midlothian, and Ellis County. So I want to thank everybody for participating in this robust discussion today. It's been a fantastic hearing. I hope it generates more discussion going forward. Thank you all for being here. And without objection, members have 5 legislative days to submit additional materials and written questions for the witnesses to the chair, which will be forwarded to the witnesses. I ask the witnesses to please respond promptly. If there's no further business, without objection, the committee is adjourned.